We're going to start. Okay. Good evening, everyone. We're a little running just a couple of minutes late tonight, so one of our board members is missing and will probably join us as the meeting goes on. So welcome, everyone. Good to see people interested in what we've got going on tonight. We've got a very interesting agenda, so I'm anxious to get going. Mary Jo, would you please verify that the meeting was posted?
Yes, it has been.
Okay, thank you. Are there any citizens in the audience that would like to address the board?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
All right, good evening. As a parent of the Waukesha School District, there are certain things that you envision for your children. Never in a million years did I envision that my first grader would have morning recess taken away last school year. I was extremely disappointed with this decision because I thought it was beneficial for children. I also felt being in class from 8:40 to 11:30 was too long without a recess break. I've talked to several parents who are also concerned. A few are here tonight. Some parents didn't even know that recess was taken away when I talked to them. They just assume it is part of the school day. A few parents contacted the principal, but we did not know what else to do about this, and it has been bothering me for almost a year. I'm here today because elementary minutes allocation is on the agenda. I started my research about recess last September. I found and read as many articles as I could about recess. I've interviewed numerous teachers, parents, and kids. I have observed my children numerous times playing with other children. As I researched about recess, I became more upset that it had been taken away because article after article that I read discussed how important recess really is for children physically, academically, and socially. There are so many more benefits to students than I had ever even thought of. The CDC specifies that recess is regularly scheduled periods within the elementary school day for unstructured physical activity and play, meaning not teacher-directed breaks. Research shows following recess, children are more attentive and better able to perform cognitively. Children are less fidgety and more on task. They have improved memory and more focused attention. They develop more brain connections. They learn negotiation skills. The articles that I read stated recess provides children with leadership skills, cooperation skills, problem solving, critical thinking, following rules, physical activity, interacting with each other, communicating with each other, dealing with winning and losing, and creativity and play. I have observed my son and daughter playing with kids on the beach, swimming with other kids, and playing baseball without adults. It really is amazing to watch and hear their conversations. I observed many of the ideas and skills the articles talked about. My daughter is very good at pretending and using her imagination. While swimming, both of my kids have had to share pool toys with other children. My son likes to compete. He and his friends come up with rules for games. Sometimes they adjust the rules because they figure out something isn't quite fair. All of this is done without adults interfering. Sometimes it is challenging as the parent to not interfere. But by not interfering, I have found that children learn valuable skills and lessons. These are the types of things that can be learned from recess. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, every child deserves and needs recess. Many schools have assumed that they could boost test scores by spending more time on cognitive pursuits, but in reality, recess provides an opportunity to rest one part of the brain while developing the other parts.
Mary Beth, we're getting close to 3 minutes.
Okay, says Andrew Gardner, a pediatrician and expert in early brain and child development. I'm advocating for a morning recess and a lunch recess. If I do not advocate for my children, I don't know who will. I am advocating for this district-wide. When it comes to recess, the research shows how this is beneficial for all children, physically, academically, and socially. Common sense also tells me this. We should make sure that every school in the school district of Waukesha provides this opportunity for all of our students, especially since 15 minutes has been added on to the school day. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mary Beth, and it's one of the...
And I do have I have a bibliography of all of the articles that I read and with my research too. So I'd be willing to share that.
Sure.
With
Sounds
you.
like we read the same articles. Thank you.
Thank you.
What
Yes.
is her name and where do her children go to school?
Her name is Mary Beth Haas, and do you want to name the school where your children attend?
Sure. It's Meadowbrook Elementary School. But I've talked to parents at many of the schools, Higher, Hillcrest, Bethesda, Rose Glen. I've been in this community my whole life, so I'm very familiar with lots of people in the community. So it's not just happening at Meadowbrook, it's district-wide, and that's why I'm advocating for it for district-wide with the elementary minutes.
Thank you. Okay. Could we please have approval of the minutes from our last meeting? Could we have a motion, please?
For approval.
Okay, is there a second, please? Second by Bill Baumgart. Okay, any discussion, questions? All those in favor, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, this evening we have Bright Lights, then we have 3 presentation items and 1 discussion item. So an interesting meeting is planned for this evening. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, Ryan, do you want to introduce Bright Lights?
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. This past July, just last month, sorry, it's August, but this past July, the entire district took a part in a pretty big institute, over 3 days of a pretty focused literacy and math institute. Here tonight to present some of the details are Emily Reddy, Rose Palmer, and Bob Antheline, and Ron Rivard. We had a great attendance. Over 800 of the staff here in the school district of Waukesha attended that, and we were really excited about some of the first steps that we're taking along here. So, I want to come up to the microphones.
Thank you for all being here tonight. Welcome.
Good evening, thanks. Yeah, it's Rob Rivard now.
We've been together for a while.
We did have a focus on literacy, math, as well as Jen Wimmer had organized a number of different mini institutes per se for social workers, school psychs that maybe don't need instructional practices, but need some like understanding compliance issues. And I don't know if you want to speak to that briefly, or?
No, just that we recognize that there's nuances to different roles that maybe aren't classroom-based. So participants from each domain of service actually were involved in literacy as well as numeracy. And if they had a separate institute for social workers, they were able to come back, report on, so that they understood expectations of teachers and our students, but then were able to dig in a little bit deeper in some of their work and goals. So it was very helpful.
So the brief overview, we had roughly nearly 800 teachers attend the 3 days. Over 400 K-8, 4 K-8 teachers attended at Waukesha West with the specific focus around literacy practices, sending some just consistent messages, some consistent frameworks for people to use. About 85 K-12 attended a math institute at Waukesha South, and about 300 plus attended a secondary, a 612, a disciplinary literacy institute at Waukesha North High School. It was exciting to have so many people there and engaged. Our feedback, we did ask for feedback, and which we'll share with you by September, on just a simple Likert scale of strongly agree to not very much. And it's about almost 70% were in the agree to strongly agreed, that it was beneficial to their learning and that they found something that they were able to take away and apply. So when I look at that, I feel like it's a really strong number to have, considering it was July. Emily and Rose are here maybe just to talk a little bit about math and some of the things that on a practitioner's scale that were shared and maybe taken away by some of the teachers.
For math, what we did is we had, the 3 days were divided up. The first day was connecting math to literacy, so trying to show how there's the connection between the disciplines. The second day was connecting math to visual models and strategies, and the third day was connecting math to problem solving. Each of those days were led by district personnel. Our math teacher leaders, our effectiveness coach was a part of it. And it was great to be able to have people who were in the district who know what the resources are, working with teachers to help them move practices forward. And I think that was one thing that we had a back channel so we could respond to questions immediately. It was all based on, there was a website so they could follow along exactly with what we were doing. One of the things on the third day, we asked them over the summer for curriculum, we've been working on creating some assessments. So on that third day, we had the teachers work through some of those assessments, give feedback so we can modify, we can change to make them ready to roll out in September. So I think the teachers could see the connection to what they were doing in the classroom and have practical ideas that they could walk away with, that they could use right away come September. And so I think that was one of the things that made it very valuable and important for our teachers to be a part of.
Rose, what do you mean by visual models, connecting math to visual models? I mean, even though I'm a teacher.
Visual models
new
and
language.
strategies, that one really talked about, number one, what are the different ways to work with numbers? We know that there's the standard algorithm that we have all learned. However, sometimes we find that kids still are not very flexible if there's only one way. So there's lots of ways to approach computation. And so getting that, and so helping kids to be able to do it visually and in their mind. So we can teach teachers different strategies such as, we looked at number lines, we looked at tape diagrams, they looked at, what else were there, array models for multiplication. So the different ways to show kids how to do computation and then moving from the different methods so that when we ask them to do two-digit addition, that they could really do it mentally in their head versus always having to jump to a paper pencil. Because we know that if we look at what some other countries are doing, it's really that mental models that are being more effective in helping kids to make change when they're at the grocery store or do computation in that way.
When you talk about a mental model, are you talking about, like, we all know 2 and 2 are 4, and 2 and 3 are 5, and 2 and 4 are 6? Is that, you mean it goes beyond that?
It goes beyond that.
In what way?
It goes beyond in that when we look at mental models, as far as, I'm trying to think of a good example, when you're adding 24 and 47, how do you go about it? You know, if people used to ask me to add 24 and 47, I'd go 4 plus 7 is 11,
do
put
too.
down the 1, carry the
do.
1, and I would mentally go through that
Do.
standard algorithm because that's how I was taught.
Right.
However, we now want kids to look at, if it's 24 and 47, I can look at, well, 4, if I add 6 more, that's really 10. So now I really have, instead of 24 and 47, I could say I have 30 and 41, and I can get my answer. You know, I'm looking at the numbers differently.
But you're doing that in your mind.
But I'm doing it in my mind versus the standard algorithm, which is usually very much quicker for kids to do once they get the idea of, at the lower grades, we're really looking at composing and decomposing numbers and knowing what makes 10, what doesn't make 10. So it starts to get to know those fluency facts because they can quickly get through them. And then when they get those smaller numbers, composing and decomposing 10, now I can use it into my double digits, my triple digits. And there's some of those same strategies that apply to multiplication and division.
So this is all done mentally, not on paper.
Again, you're going to start with a paper, you know, showing how to do jumps on the number line, how to do jumps
Oh,
on a
okay.
number track.
Okay.
So that they get flexibility with their numbers. And then once they get the paper, it's then moving them to that mental model next. And so one of the things that I've seen as I've looked across our district, as I've gone out into classrooms, our teachers have really gotten very good at showing kids different models, different ways of doing addition and subtraction so that there's that fluency. And now it's moving to the next step of how do we get from using the paper and pencil to now doing it in our heads, and which again will build on that fluency piece.
Are we taking parents along with us? Because, you know, kids bring their math homework home, and the parents want to do it my way. And there's so many other ways now that you're telling me that, you know, that can cause some confusion between the student and the parent.
Absolutely.
We have some parent pieces that are in draft very early draft mode. So we hope to have them like in presentation mode for them and accessible, like within the next 6 to 12 months, because it just takes a little while to put some pieces and
Okay.
to put it into Waukesha language and get it translated for both literacy and math. So think of it as like little mini roadmaps that they could just access that would give it to them and go, okay, this helps me understand. And also say, as a parent, I can also maybe do A, B, C, D, E to help my kid in first grade,
Okay.
kindergarten, all the way through.
So you're going to make a booklet.
We're gonna make little links that would go like 2-page links that they could access on the website, or we could make,
Oh,
we
okay.
could always make them available in paper if they wanted to.
Well, you may have to because everybody doesn't have a computer,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Dr. Langell?
Just very quickly, thank you very much. And also, I applaud what I think I'm hearing, which is that you're having students do this using their own brains and not staring at a screen and asking that computer to do this for them. Thank you very much. I think that's great, because what we've been seeing, and Bill mentioned this, remember?
I'm sitting here thinking,
I know,
All right.
Rose
Me-
knows that because we've talked.
yeah. But thank you. I mean, that's great news.
Patrick?
And that's the goal, to have them be able to have the students at all ages do the math in their head.
Including the
Because I remember sitting in this
Yeah,
room,
I know.
in this committee, discussing that with the teacher, and told me that that was useless because everybody's gonna have one of these. And they don't need to figure it out in their head. And my comment was,
Oh,
go to a store where the cash register takes a digger and they gotta figure it out in their head. 5.1% of a dollar, most of them can't figure it out.
that's right, or give change,
Yeah,
compact
right,
change.
Yeah, so I'm glad to hear that it's, because I think that's a very important part of everyday life, is to be able to do math in your head,
Mental math.
The mental
you know,
math.
on
And-
demand.
And that was, again, one of those reasons for that focus for that day
Right.
was to, again, just to to review its importance. And it always comes up about the cash register. The cash
Yep.
register goes down.
Because
or-
everybody's experienced it.
Right, or, you know, you go to give change and you give them that extra quarter,
Yep.
and they're like,
Yeah.
I didn't punch that
They're
into the
dumbfounded.
register to know how much to give back. And so knowing how to tackle that problem, you know, so
Absolutely.
that goes into problem solving also, and not just the mental fluency, but how do I tackle that problem? What are some strategies to get at it?
Yep.
What do we use for student practice? And then you can go on with your presentation. Are we using, I'm going to ask you, are we using worksheets, workbooks? What are we doing? They have to have practice.
It really, there's lots of different ways. Again, we know from understanding students, they need different practices. So
Yes,
There
yes.
is some with worksheets, but there's some with actual working with, in a game type of situation where
Okay.
they're playing games. Sometimes it is on the computer because that is a mode that some students really respond to. Sometimes it is through a discourse, that number talks. We're gonna do a lot with that as we move forward this year, as, you know, let me hear what everybody's strategy is. And so through number talks, we're learning and growing. So that there's lots of different ways to get at the practice, and not just one way is best for everyone.
Do state tests ask students to explain how they got their answer, or do they just accept whatever answer?
As we move to Smarter Balance, that is gonna be one of the requirements, is
Really?
to be able to explain why.
explain why.
And that is definitely one of the things that we need to continue to help our students to
Oh,
move forward
right.
with.
Oh, that's going to be difficult. Yes.
Thank you. Rose, when my son is working on his iPad, let's say I say do math for 20 minutes today, if he gets a question wrong, he can click on something that says how to do it if he's having trouble. But it might just tell him one way. Is there a game or an app that, one of those, whether it's iXL or Alex, where maybe there's a cloud and it can show him all the different ways? Do you know what I mean? Like all the things that you're explaining, all those ways that probably have a name that I don't know. That little guy with the wand or whatever is showing him how to do it just in that
One
one
way.
way.
And that is one of the things that we're going to be looking at, I think you're talking about, is that as we look at a review, is our IXL and our Alex the best programs out there to help kids know lots of different ways? And so some of the programs are very well, they do a really great job in the one way, but they may not expose them to all of them. And so that's one of the reviews that we'll be looking at as we move forward this coming year.
And we all learn in different ways, if there was the mental way, or if they could just click on whatever way
Right.
helps them best, or if it shows that maybe they've mastered one way, but they haven't really tried those other ways, maybe it could just, I know you don't write the software, but If you could
But-
find those that are
But
already
those
out
are
there, that'd
definitely
be great.
things I look for when I'm looking at what are some recommendations for software, because you're right. That is a programming issue. The program has to be able to show kids different ways, and not all of them are, and you're looking at IXL and Alex are the two that you mentioned. They have been around for quite a while. If I think back, we've had IXL for several years, we've had Alex for several years, and some of the newer ones coming out do a better job of showing those different strategies.
And as a parent, I can also look at those and see how he's learning and all, because I can't be in the classroom all day, and so I can see, oh, maybe the teacher's teaching them all three ways, or maybe that's a way that I can learn instead of if you also have a parent letter, but at least, because I'm thinking, well, for the next 12 months, how am I supposed to help them? And I know you have other things going on, but maybe that could help in the process.
I know one of the programs we're looking at definitely does go through different strategies and help
That's good.
with that.
Excellent.
Okay, well, continue, please, and thank you for allowing us to interrupt you.
I'm going to interrupt quick before we transition to the reading, for the literacy side of this. Just a side note on the training. It was about 3 or 4 months ago that this committee had a chance to meet some of our math leaders who went to the Carroll training. Rose had taken the part to really develop that team, but also in this training this summer, Rose and that team presented and trained the district. So it was great to see a huge return on not only growing the capacity of our district, but having that team lead an outstanding workshop, which is when Bob talked about the rankings. So it was great to see, and I think much appreciated that team was able to take what they had learned and be able to give back. But I also know when people are learning from their peers, they know that the ins and outs of the district, or the situation that we have in Waukesha, or knowing the schools, it really was a match. So I just want to point that out. So thanks for leading them.
And one other thing that now that you mentioned that was really cool is we had the teacher leaders from different buildings. So there was Amanda Shesky from Meadowbrook, Mill Tagey from Hawthorne, Tiffany Humphrey from Higher. And, there were 9 people that all had connections to buildings, and so you get a bigger buy-in and people listening, because these are the people they work with. So I agree. I think that definitely helped its success along the way too, and sharing what they've learned along the way.
I'll bet you, Rose, I couldn't pass the state test.
I think you could. I really think you could. I think it would challenge all of us.
Seriously.
Because and it depends on what level you're talking about. Are you looking at the 3rd grade level, or, because I've played with some of the 8th and 9th and 10th grade levels, and it definitely challenges me. And right now,
Sure,
you can do
me
it and you
too.
don't get your results, so I don't know if I passed the
Yeah,
test.
right,
so.
right, okay. Thank you.
All right, so 3 days of literacy was at West, and that was with all the 4K through 8th grade reading and writing teachers. Those sessions were led by Linda Dorn and Carla Sophis from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. The biggest theme of all 3 days, which is also a theme we've talked a lot about in the district, is our need to be really intentional and responsive with our instruction, so that we're making decisions based on data and decisions on exactly what we're seeing the kids do, so we can meet them where they are and move them forward. And that is the structure that Workshop really lays on, is having expert teachers who can see what a student is doing and diagnose on the spot what their next steps are. And so that was a really big theme throughout the whole workshop. They focused on different parts of intentional vocabulary instruction, teaching grammar. I know that is a part that we've talked about a lot.
Big time.
But all of the different pieces that really go into teaching reading had a different focus. Getting kids talking about books. We talked about discourse and the connection there, and getting kids responding through writing to reading. They called the 3 days an immersion. It was a lot of information. The exciting part is that we're going to keep coming back to it and continue to wrap around teachers as we're implementing those practices into the classroom, but always being really intentional and responsive with those practices. Each day had built-in time at the end for teachers to gather with their school team, so that principals and coaches and teachers could really talk about, okay, we just did all this learning, what does that look like in my setting? How does that fit with what I already know? How does that fit with what doesn't fit? What am I wondering? And there was a lot of really good conversation. At the beginning, the first day was, I think, a lot of
whoa, this is a lot of new information. And as it went on, you could feel the excitement build. And so by day 3, there was really this excitement in the air about, okay, I'm going to do this, or I hadn't really thought about, I've always had my kids respond, but it was more of just respond to this book, and now I can be really intentional and see how that works to further my instruction and further students' learning. Our challenge now is to keep that excitement going into the school year and really bring those things alive within the schools and have teachers and principals and coaches continuing to collaborate and grow their practices, always with being responsible and intentional.
Tell me, what informs a teacher at a specific grade level of the skills, specific skills students should learn that year? Is it the Common Core? What is it? Is there a list of skills? I mean, we used to have what was called priority skills list, and so,
I think
right, Rose?
There's a couple pieces. I mean, most of our schools have continuums, like teachers have
Okay.
access to continuums.
Okay,
One of the things we're doing this summer is trying to, let's just say, I don't want to say, make them a little more user-friendly, so that as people get more expertise, they're able to use the resources and dig deeper. So I think that it really comes from lots of places.
okay.
One of the things I walked away with, and it's just like maybe a reframing, is you really analyze the behaviors of kids. So how does Emily interact with the text? You know, how does she try to make words come out of her mouth? You know, how does she move her mouth? You know, when she comes into a problem and you ask her a question, how does she respond? You know, it's really about analyzing kids' behaviors as opposed to telling kids what to do. And so that's where I think that responsive and intentional piece really comes in, because there was a lot of people that, in a good way, said, you really do, I mean, I know I need to know my kids, but wow, I really need to know, you really need to know, not only know your kids, but have a lot of expertise to know how to move from any level, whether they're, you know, a high achieving reader to a middle reader or a writer. So it's really about analyzing those behaviors in kids and trying to coach them into the next level.
But I'm still wondering, you know, let's take grammar, for example. You know, are there certain skills in grammar that all kids need to know by the end of first grade? Because how can they write if they don't know certain skills? That's what I meant.
Yeah, we have to detail out some of those pieces.
We have some lists?
So just think of it as simply as, like, say, in kindergarten, you know, by the end of kindergarten, you know you got to capitalize the first letter, and there's got to be
Okay.
some sort of punctuation at the end of it.
Okay.
By first grade, we've got those two pieces, we're going to add 3 or 4.
Sure,
And
sure,
so when you get
that's
to
what I
6th
mean.
or 7th grade,
Right.
and then they're able to start using those to manipulate differently.
Right.
As opposed to just, okay, I use a semicolon, and then I do this after it.
Okay, right.
But now they know how to use those pieces.
Okay.
And some of those pieces we have to frame out.
Sure.
As simply as, you need to teach this.
Absolutely, yeah.
As well as sometimes even putting some things in, saying, you know what, kids should have 9 to 15 pieces of published writing by the end of 5th grade. You know, just some of those kinds of frames, but at the same time allowing them to be the professionals during the day, you know, on the ongoing base to really guide the kids. So we have some work to do with some of those pieces to kind of detail that. And they've spent we have spent quite a bit of time in both math, trying to detail some of those. Okay, you need to know how to add before we can jump into multiplying. You gotta know
yes.
2-digit numbers, all those. So we have to kind of detail some of those pieces out, so that there are just like the must-haves. Even as simple, not as simple as, but like even like word recognition, like word lists. All right, by the end of 2nd grade, you should know 150 of these words just
Of
off the
these
site,
words, okay.
things like that.
So do you call those word lists, is that the vocabulary they should learn?
It'd be more like just sight words. Those would be
Sight words,
yeah.
okay. Because, you know, with the many books that kids read in one year, you know, there's really not a set list of vocabulary words like there kind of used to be when we had the old readers, and, you know, the vocabulary was kind of regulated. So those word lists, you say, are really a list of words they have to know.
Those are the ahs, the ands, the and,
Yeah,
then, wheres,
the sight
you know,
words.
which. And then at the same time, as we tighten a little bit up on
Yes,
some pieces,
yeah.
you start to build in some of the academic vocabulary that might filter into social studies or science or into music class. And then that way, it's not just relied on that 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever the time frame is
Right.
on the reading teacher, but it starts to span across. And
Right.
that's the word Emily used was that immersion. So we really start to do it as a team a little bit more.
Now, many teachers have word walls. When I go and visit classrooms, I see word walls. Now, this is vocabulary that's generated by the students from different things they read. Is that where that comes from?
Most often, yep.
Okay.
And the thing with being intentional with word walls is making sure that it's not just lists up on the walls, but that they're really taught and revisited and used over and over.
So it's really vocabulary that students are generating?
It depends. There's two purposes to it. Sometimes those words come out of books that have been read aloud that then the
Okay.
teacher has said, ooh, let's look closer at this word. What are
Okay.
different ways that we can use it? One of the big things we learned with vocabulary is often we think that the vocabulary we need to teach are those really complicated, tricky words that they've never seen before. But what Linda said is that after second grade, what really trips kids up is just basic vocabulary used in interesting ways. So for example, kids know what an envelope is. They've seen it in the mail. They've gotten envelopes before. But all of a sudden, an author talks about the fog enveloping the city, and it throws them for a loop. That's when comprehension starts to break down. So it's really looking more, not at just the fanciest words, but also really looking at words that have multiple meanings, because it's not complex words necessarily that authors are using. It's basic words in complex ways.
So are you telling me that a college kid won't call his or her grandma and ask them how to address an envelope? A Waukesha student won't go to college and call their grandma and ask them how to address an envelope. They're learning. I mean, that's a skill.
That's different, though, isn't
Yep.
it, a little bit?
Well, it isn't different. It's all part of writing.
Yep, I mean, that, I would hope they'd learn how to
Thank you.
address envelopes. yeah.
Proceed.
Can I just ask something real quick?
Yeah.
Thanks again, also, for coming. And this sounds really exciting. I think often on this committee or board, you know, I'm seen as a negative, and I'm not. But I do think there are many times when I come and I hear presentations, and they sound pretty exciting, but a lot of it is what I would call education ease. And that's fine, because I know it means a lot to you. But let's say I'm a brand-new teacher to this district, or let's say I'm a parent listening. And I would say intentional, well, what does that mean? You know, I am intentional. I mean, I've been teaching for 5 years at another district, and I intend to be skilled and excellent, and so what are you talking about? So there's some words that I think you use with great ease that unless somebody's in education, they don't mean anything. Because when you say intentional, I'm thinking, well, I hope
right.
all my kids' teachers are intentional. I mean, so the more specifics you give us, is what I'm trying to say, the better. And the less you give us what I would call sort of the jargon, the better. Because then I think we can understand, like when you're talking about an envelope versus envelop, you know, obviously noun, verb, different, more sophisticated use of a word, all of that, I mean, that's great. And I know we were taught, and I don't know if you see this too, I mean, vocabulary is just so key. And of course, the kids who read a lot have a better vocabulary, we know that. But we were taught that if you are learning a new word, and this was even in grade school, I remember being taught this, and you can use it 3 times correctly in a sentence or write it 3 times correctly, you own it for life. So reading is one way to access a word, but then using it obviously is, I guess we'd say, an intentional way to reinforce that learning. So I'm here to thank you for what you're doing. I'm not negative at all. It's just that the more when you come and give us specifics as to what these tools are and how they're really helping teacher, that really helps us understand. Because otherwise, the word intentional doesn't mean anything to me.
And we'll help with that.
Yeah, great.
So, I mean, the language that, I mean, Emily and Rose use, that's what I want, that's how we want our teachers and our principals and our coaches to be talking.
Okay.
When I mentioned those parent briefs, that's where we would really kind of simplify the language.
Good.
And we have talked about those even
Or
like
clarify.
for a new teacher who maybe isn't quite familiar, step 1. Take a look at this, it's simplified a little bit, it's detailed, but yet you've got a little, okay, this gives me an idea, and then I can connect with another teacher, my coach, or Emily, and myself, and say,
Great.
so what does this mean if I'm really doing this and taking it to another level?
Yeah, and
That's-
specifics
that's where
make all the
then
difference.
You look at a continuum, or you go to some of the other,
Right.
curricular pieces that are evolving, so.
Absolutely, thank you. Yep.
Ron, you got a second?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You want? Okay. The Disciplinary Literacy Institute that took place at North, so to try to make that a little bit more accessible for the audience. The disciplinary literacy is basically thinking about teaching thinking strategies in all subject areas. So because reading is thinking, so the focus of those 3 days were primarily to have teachers develop their thinking around how to help their students learn to read as a mathematician would read a math problem. So the math teachers were looking at smarter balanced assessment questions, different things, and developing strategies that how they read as a mathematician in order to be able to support the learning and thinking of their math students, or reading like a historian, or reading like a musician, et cetera, et cetera. So if I'm giving a main theme, it was trying to make that thinking visible in students. So asking students to confer with the teacher, with each other, to ask high-level critical thinking questions as opposed to just providing information. Giving students real ownership in their learning, regardless of the content area. So that would probably be the best overview I could give. I would say similar to what Emily described at West, the first day was a lot of information. Stephanie Harvey presented that day, talked a lot about the big themes of metacognitive strategies, which is basically making thinking visible, encouraging students to do that, sharing, conferring with each other. And then the second 2 days were actually more application. We asked teachers to work by content area with larger groups. I had the opportunity to work with the math group quite a bit and develop strategies to help kids immerse themselves into strategy-based reading, like looking into how to break I'll just use math, it's the easiest one. How to break down a math problem, what do you look for? Do you look for distractors? Do you look for vocabulary? Do you look for all of the things that a, quote, reading teacher would do, just in a different context? And I think one of the most enlightening conversations that took place with the large group were when the math team made a list of about 14 strategies that they would use to work through a math problem. And the question that was posed to them as a group was, which of these are exclusive to math? You know, and they said, well, formulas would probably be the only one. So they saw the connection across disciplines. Well, interestingly enough, we came back to the large group. Dan Puchinsky, who's our new math coordinator, was sharing that epiphany with the group, and right away 4 hands went up in the audience saying, well, actually we use formulas in English class as you could look at subject plus predicate equals sentence. We look at things in a foreign language setting where we look at cognates and different things. So it is formulaic because we have to follow a certain path. So there was a lot of connections that way, and I believe that in that way it was a successful learning opportunity because it just started our work, and what made it even more successful, to use an example just from earlier today, is we had principals together and we were talking about practices that we want to work on and develop across the course of the school year. Through professional development, et cetera, and overwhelmingly making thinking visible came out K-12 for us. So the foundation of that learning isn't just going to stop in July, so I think that's the encouraging part of it.
A couple things Ryan had started off and thanked the math lead teachers. I also think like our principals did an excellent job at all levels, engaging their staff in conversations during the time. I've had a couple principals say they got together with 30-plus staff members the following week voluntarily to like just talk it out and be like, okay, how can we do some of these things? I think there was a good sense of urgency to take some of this and really start to go to try to figure out how to move the needle a little bit in some spots, and so that was a real positive piece. Is that my end of the Oscars?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Wonder how long that's been
I
waiting
guess
for.
we're done. So I want to recognize those groups for just doing an excellent job in leading. I feel like I need to do it. The custodial staff and all the people at the buildings who got
amazing.
it ready on a daily basis, considering it's the
Absolutely.
middle of the summer and they're trying to clean, paint, and do construction while we're trying to learn at the same time. They were just very accommodating. And also, just to the support, we get from Jen, from Ron, from Ryan, from Todd, from you guys, just to have this opportunity in the summer, is really, I think, beneficial. And then we had 800-plus teachers who came in. If you really could, definitely worth shaking each one of their hands for taking 3 days out of the summer and coming in and doing this. And I think we tried to recognize that, but it just thought maybe it'd be worth saying it one last time.
Mr. Baumgart?
Yeah, Bob, you took some of the words out of my mouth in that, but I too want to thank you guys for putting this together. I think one of the things that has impressed me is the fact that for about a year now, we have had that sense of urgency about some of this literacy and the math trainings and doing a better job to close some of our gaps. I think the fact that 800 some odd teachers participated is a tremendous show, the fact that they believe that we can get there and do this. And I think that, the fact you put it together, had the opportunity to attend part of it, and I'm very pleased. As Rose knows and Emily knows, I've talked to them both about things like grammar and being able to multiply in your head. These are things we have let slide, and I'm so glad to see that we're intentionally, Ellen?
Yep, intentionally.
We're intentionally driving in the direction of fixing some of those things, so I'm very pleased with it. And I want to congratulate and thank you for the efforts you all put forward on that. It's been wonderful.
The opportunity was great. I mean, there was the real work though is
I know.
between now and when we get to do it again.
And don't think we won't remember that. I mean, we will want to see this kind of progress and in classroom visits and stuff like that. Great. We want to see it.
Yeah, maybe to close, that's sort of our key challenge. And I think it's up to us to not have us talk about what happened in July and have us talk about what's happening today.
Right.
And that's the point when we started this, which was we needed a place to start to bring some attention, 800 people making a commitment and recognizing this. But we haven't had a problem initiating change in this district in the past. We've maybe had some challenges institutionalizing it and really making it a way of life. And that's our goal in the end. Obviously, increasing student achievement is the end result, talking about putting points on the board or moving the needle or whatever it is. And that's our pursuit. We're excited about it. We think that we've sort of righted in the direction where we want to go. Lastly, when we talk about capacity for our district, we hired over 100 teachers this year, again, which basically means for 100 people in our system, nothing that we said up to today counts. And we take that seriously in our work for sustainability, for training. We take that seriously for building the next generation of teacher leaders. And I mentioned the math team of leaders that we invested in, and we're getting a great return on in terms of their passion and energy in teaching those around them. But at the end of this, in the next year or so, I don't know the exact number of people that are going to leave with a 316 license. Do we have that number? 21. We'll have 21 teachers that do not have a 316 reading license that will, after this training and additional year-long support and training we'll have in our system, which again will take on not just the licensure, but additional training and knowledge to each school or each classroom. So it's a very intentional act of not only having events, but also investing in people, investing in the leadership that we need here for this sustained conversation. And later in our agenda tonight, we're going to be talking about professional development, and I'll go into detail about what our efforts are to sustain this training, that anyone that came into our system at any day would have access to that type of quality of training. And we're not waiting a year, we're not waiting even 2 months, it's beginning right away, so.
Well, I need to say in closing that we have been offering outstanding professional development for the last couple of years, and I think it really shows in what our students can do. So congratulations to you, and thank you to all of you leaders for providing those opportunities for our teachers to learn and grow, because I remember back when I was a teacher, summers were summers. Summers aren't, there's no such thing as summer anymore. It's professional development every summer, all summer, so thank you very much. Karen?
Thank you. I also wanted to say thank you, and thank you to the 800-plus teachers that were there. I've heard from some teacher friends of mine from other districts that have said about their professional development that they just don't want to be there, or that it's not worth their time. So I'm thrilled that 70% say that they have learned and grown from the experience. I'm concerned about the other 30% that I think, okay, if you're taking a class or something, you should walk away with something that you've learned new. So I'm not really sure what how you phrased your questions for your questionnaire, but I don't know if that's just because it's in the summer and they're away from their families. Yeah, but I thank the teachers and all of you, so many people that have put in that dedication, because those are my kids that you're doing it for, and there's thousands of kids in Waukesha that you're doing that for, so thank you. I know you gave up time with your families and beautiful weather. Thank you for inviting all of us as well. I was living at the fair that week with all the animals and our kids, but would have loved to be there. So just thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ryan, our first presentation item, sale overview.
All right. I'll be taking us through this one, and with a 3-day training on sale, and with I don't think we have 3 days tonight, so I'm going to give an overview of this framework, but it's pretty foundational to how we're approaching some of our work. I mentioned before our sustainability challenge, or the need to move away from just initiating things to truly seeing an impact in the classroom in terms of student result.
Can I just stop you, because,
Yeah.
I mean, probably everybody in the audience and everybody up here knows what SAIL stands for. But a lot of people, if in fact we
Yeah.
have crowds listening at home, have no clue. And there's nothing in this that indicates what SAIL is an acronym for. I agree. That might be a good thing to do.
Sure, I have it right away.
Good.
So, forgot where I was for a second.
All right.
So, our point in attending this retreat, there was about a team of 13. We were there as a district. There was about 14 other districts there that had teams of different sizes that were there. SAIL stands for School Administrators Institute for Transformational Leadership. And if you think of those words, school administrators, so we have groups Todd was there with us as a superintendent, we had some district representation as well as some principal representation. Because of the size of our district, we're the largest district there. Many other schools had classroom teachers and other people, board members even, that took on different roles. Our goal was to go and get a glimpse and bring back. But the work, this training was really designed to look at any of our, it wasn't general to a specific training, it was general to specifically how were we approaching the challenges that we faced. And there's really 4 phases of the training. And you can see them in the 4 boxes up there. We spent a significant amount of time with problem identification, also in starting to look at what strategies or theory of action we had, and I'll explain each of those in a second. Where the second half of the training really got into developing an action portfolio, or even how we would monitor our success as a system. But for the first painstaking full day, we talked about problem identification intentionally for a full day, because we didn't want to just assume, when we talk about, for example, in Waukesha, we focused on literacy, that we talked about what was the true problem, or the nature of beyond just maybe the student achievement scores weren't where we wanted them to be, or that beyond just that a teacher did or did not know how to instruct at a high level, or beyond whether or not Readers and Writers Workshop was an answer or not the answer. It got a little bit deeper, and the point that the first day got to was an intentional look at the leadership within our system, and what were we doing or not doing to help bring new initiatives forward all the way through. And that was really the end result of the training, was to look at almost a quote in there that almost 90% of initiative failure in organizations, especially school ones, really fall on the shoulders of principals or coaches or district administrators of seeing through, versus just whether it was a good or a bad initiative. So we focused on problem identification as one of those pieces. The second phase was getting into a theory of action. I have it's hard to read on the screen right here, but in one of your handouts, it's a lot more detailed. The second piece was a theory of action that we had a little bit of fun with, and that's really basically an if-then statement, but it gets at your assumptions in your organization. We looked at our if-then statement of Readers and Writers Workshop as we currently have been existing for the last number of years, which basically, without stating it, without having it written down, was if our teachers in our classrooms are good at teaching Readers and Writers Workshop, then our student achievement will go up. We didn't have anything more specific about what other things that would need to take place. While we probably were acting on some of those things, we weren't as specific as we needed to be, and as a result, we probably weren't as, you're going to use the intentional word, as intentional in our follow-up practice to see it through. And so one example, again, in your packet, we had taken some if-then statements, and we took some time to comprehend to construct what we thought would be a better statement that would guide our work this year with the literacy framework you just heard. And that statement talked about if administrators, coaches, and teachers are knowledgeable about instructional practices that lead to high levels of literacy, and if they design and participate in ongoing professional development and training, and if they regularly collect, analyze, and act on data, and if teachers receive timely and effective coaching/feedback, then. So we really took apart all of the things that we needed to do at a high level in order to make sure that these instructional practices took hold in every classroom. And as a result, you notice who I listed: administrators, coaches, and teachers, and that we all had an equal role in seeing these practices through. So just by making statements alone like that, that begins to outline our work for the school year. The then start part of our statement, the if-then, really led into some other things that we're missing currently as a system. And that was, then our system will have stronger sources of data, which include both student achievement data and program levels of program implementation data. Teachers will increase their levels of self-efficacy and performance. And lastly, and most importantly, students will demonstrate higher levels of performance and literacy. So we used literacy as our main piece. This, while nothing that I said was probably, but we'd be saying that it's a surprise. What's important about using our first day of training was that really framed all of the work that we were going to do, and it framed really our checkpoints for our system throughout this whole next school year and school years beyond. So the next phase I want to go to is really the last phase, the last page of your handout, which looks like this. It is a sheet of paper that has about 5 yellow lines or 5 highlighted lines. It should be the last page in that packet. This is our 100-day monitoring plan, and I skipped to the end of our work. But the 5 areas in bold are basically our if statements broken apart. And the SAIL training took us from not only identifying what problems we were trying to address with literacy and what our theory of action would be, but this would be some of our points. These are, what you have in your hand is Central Middle School's checkpoint, but it would be the same for all of our building principals. And at the 5 different points in the year that started this summer, it would continue on to next summer, you see that at these different points in the year, we're going in and intentionally looking for specific targeted goals in literacy to reach those achievement levels. The second phase that we're looking at is the clear identification of some high leverage instructional practices. They have the choice of what practices to use, and we're encouraging their ownership and in their collaboration in developing those. The next one is that at each site that the leaders are developing leadership and they have professional development, that it's guiding this ongoing each year. The fourth one is a stretch for our system, is that we have some established progress monitoring, and there's a system of data collection and progress monitoring that's happening. And that really aligns well with the educator effectiveness model that we have, which is the new state system. And then the last one is really that we have an ongoing focus on results, and is what we're doing working? Are we getting the gains that we are hoping to have, and that we have readily available data at each site? So this is sort of the end result of the SAIL training, which is basically, if we're going to walk our talk with our work with literacy, some of the many things that you heard about today, we heard about what practices teachers are using. we have to, as a system, ensure that we are doing everything in our part to support every teacher in our system with providing them ongoing support and training, with providing them the best support, feedback, and coaching that we can throughout that, and that we're monitoring to make sure that every classroom and every student in our system is impacted by those great practices. And lastly, that we're accountable to the community to be able to show what is and is not working in our system. So to recap SAIL and the training thus far, it's almost a 3-year commitment. We're assigned a coach. Our coach for our school district of Waukesha is Dr. Joe Schrader, former superintendent Muskego and now director of ASA. He is our coach and reviews plans and provides checkpoints and does some monitoring and guiding questions for our system. We have 4 or 5 checkpoints throughout the year with the SAIL, as a SAIL group with the other districts, as well as ongoing SAIL training. We had a 5-hour SAIL meeting today with included every building representative to really make sure that we are clear on hitting our marks and we're working as best we can to do this. So today's goal, and the work that you have is sort of drafts that are just unfolding. You'll have the complete package in a binder in September. Today's goal was to introduce the SAIL framework, which isn't specifically tied to an initiative, so to speak, but is really a process that really helps the district unravel the work that they're doing and slow it down to intentionally see work to go from an initiated stage or change initiation to truly implement this in our system and hopefully institutionalize our practices. So that's the goal of the overview, and I want to just kind of give a glimpse of a pretty intense 3-day training, and I probably did that in about 12 minutes, so I know there'll probably be many questions as we go.
Right. Who participated? Who participated?
From this district?
Yeah.
From Todd Gray, superintendent, and myself. We also had Ron Rivard, Bob Antheline, Sarah Barrett, Sharon Thiede, Jen Wimmer and Dee Garcia were a part of some of the initial planning, weren't at the full training, but have been a part of really preparing for it and following up. And then from a building perspective, we had high school principal Tim Joint, high school principal Jody Landish. We had middle school principal Jason Sadowski, elementary principal Mary Velez Garcia, Amy Rebel, Melissa Nikolic, Jeff Peterson, and Joe Russell. If I think I got them all.
Is this a state initiative, a DPI initiative, a CISA initiative?
Oh,
Where's it coming
great
from?
question. ASA is the Association of Wisconsin School Administrators. This
ASA.
is their second year of running, second cohort.
Okay.
Last year, I went alone
Okay.
to review the training to see if it was sort of an investment that would fit where we were at. So we're technically in year 1, but we're cohort 2. Local districts, Sussex Hamilton, Kettle Moraine, Brown Deer were all in cohort 1, and a lot of the feedback and results that they were getting and the progress that they made in the year were some of the reasons that we also wanted to prepare and go through.
Brian, I know that you understand, or I suspect you do, everything that's probably on this sheet, right? So that when I read this, I'm sure I read it with different eyes than you do, because I don't understand most of what you're saying here. But I look at, for instance, school improvement plan, and I look at step 1 this summer, and then I look at step 5 next summer, and they're pretty much identical. So it's really hard for me to see where you're going. You know, it says, step 5, data develops literacy school level student-based instructional measurable goals. That's a mouthful. But then if you look at step 1, that's the same thing.
Exactly.
Oh, well, where's the progress in all that?
Well, the progress is that if you look at what drives our work is our student achievement goals. What did we achieve at this level this year? So where's this level of student achievement? Pick a school, Whittier, Banting, West High School.
Okay.
They have achievement goals for this year for literacy. One of the things that we're going to be monitoring is, are they achieving their goals? Are they exceeding their goals? Where's the student growth at for those goals? As we go through the year, one of the things we'll be asking for is progress and updates on those goals. Well, one of the main piece in developing goals for each year for their buildings is, throughout the year, depending on how much progress they've made, depending on what the student data is showing, depending on where they've gotten to, that should drive their next goal. And so while through this year, they have a goal to drive their work this year, and they watch and they monitor and provide updates, we would expect that goal to be updated each year. So this first one, having a school improvement plan, every building has one each year, and this helps to guide their development of this goal each year.
Well, now that you put it in those words, it makes more sense.
And I apologize.
Well, you don't have to apologize. It's just that this is sometimes the problem I have, and I may be alone in this whole community, in trying to figure out this education ease. Because I look at step 1 and step 5, they're identical. I look at number 3, they're identical. 1 and 5 are identical. And I look at 4, 1 and 5 are identical. So the way you just described it makes sense.
And I
because
apologize for that. I'm trying to put a lot in. Well,
any sense.
yeah, well, if you look at across at the deadline, what you see is
Yeah.
our checkpoints for summer 14 were here to help launch our work this summer. But we wanted we wanted people to see the recurring nature of a school improvement plan. Goals or where you're at drive something, but really when you get back to this, a lot of these processes repeat. If you're going to be putting together a professional development plan for your school for this school year, for example, we monitor the school improvement plans or professional development plans for every school. What are you planning to do this year? How are you going to utilize the time when the students are staying home for those days? What plans do you have in place? That's a thing we monitor in summer and help support as people are developing. That would be the same thing that we would monitor next summer as we launch into each school year. So you want to see, where did you come up with your professional development plan? Where is it? So a lot of this is a process and work that people are doing, but we expect the process to be informed by the results that you're getting or growth in teacher practice.
It might
each
be,
year.
I mean, and again, I'm just a real fan of plain English.
Yeah, and what I'm showing here is a live artifact that, our principals developed at the SAIL work, that there's a lot of acronyms in here, and I think the point in sharing it was really to show the nature of we're accountable to each other every 90 days. Technically, we have called a 100-day plan, but every quarter, we're accountable to showing product and movement in terms of student achievement, in terms of staff professional development, in terms of teacher practice. And this system was, developed by this team to make sure we did this. We ran the same process as last year. And again, what's in the boxes is very school heavy, acronyms and focus points, but the process itself and the checkpoints and really what we're driving for is kind of the point behind SAIL. So,
Ryan,
Well,
can we
that
take on all
sorta
this
helps.
stuff? SAIL and then the literacy plan, literacy numeracy plan?
Let me
Yes.
add, because I was going to add to this, some Ellen's concern is, this really should be simplified, because that's really what this program is about, is trying to focus on what's important. This isn't a separate program. This takes literacy and puts focus to it. We've asked our teachers to do a lot of things in the last few years, and so this program helps focus on what's important and helps us push away some of the stuff that is kind of getting in our way, so to speak. So I guess that is my role in this, is to make sure that there's focus on the literacy, the math, and some of the other important board goals. You set literacy for me, and that's obviously our number one goal here. And so, some of the districts had as many as 6 goals. I said 3, I think, is the most we're gonna have, because they're big, huge
big
goals,
goals, yeah.
and they're ongoing. So some of that, Ellen, that you're seeing, where you're seeing the same thing from is good, because it means that we're continuing to maintain the same process.
Well,
We're
that's
not-
good to know, because
so-
otherwise it sounds like we're spinning our wheels. And
Yeah.
I remember when my 2 were at Randall, which now is 10, 12, 13, 14 years ago or whatever, hearing at parent meetings that there were these goals in math and literacy for Randall, school improvement goals. Presumably they were monitored, presumably they monitored some improvement, I hope. But I'm not quite sure why this is all new. I mean, hopefully we've been doing this, and I think it's great to continue doing it, although I would probably put it in a whole different kind of English. But I'm not quite sure how this is going to get us where we want to go if it didn't 10, 12 years ago. Or do you think it did?
I don't know how, I can't say how it was dealt with 10, 12 years ago. There was a lot more site-based
Yeah?
work then, and we're trying to provide a little more district
Okay,
uniformity to what we're trying to do. And I think that was the purpose of the PD we had this summer, both in terms of the math and the literacy. But again, I like it because it's taking some key goals and putting those out front and providing a pathway to get there and kind of pushing the other stuff to say that's, this is your focus, not so much that stuff. Because we have added.
and I appreciate your English because you were being very clear,
I-
which this is absolutely murky to me.
Well, and I apologize for the murkiness, but the directness of it is what we need. We need to, when we set goals for literacy achievement in the system, we need to hit that goal.
Yep.
Yeah.
We want to get the results. We want to be proud of the gains that we're making. We want to make, so have goals been set in the past? Yes. But with the new state accountability system that came into place 2 years ago and the new state report cards that are out, and with the new educator effectiveness rules, every school has to set a school learning objective or an SLO. And I know those acronyms in here, but every school has to have a very specific goal that they're held accountable to a part of these report cards. So the reason that's number one is because this helps to ensure that those are of the highest quality. We piloted that as a district all last year. Every teacher in our system has to have a very clear goal, an SLO, their own classroom goal. This was new to them last year, and they had to pilot that. So we're trying to take the work that's happening at a state level and make it very intentional. That's where sort of the layer one comes in. Where layer two comes in with the practices, and you heard about some of the training, is that we're trying to truly support the teacher team at defining their practice. So when it says on the sheet, and I understand it, that every teacher has to define a key high leverage practice or two that they think are going to get the results. So some of this none of it's new. What's new to our system is that we're focusing on principals, coaches, my role, each of our roles, of how do we ensure and see this work through so that it's not just activities that happen, but we can stand behind each number we put up and ask, are we getting the results with each student? Are we getting the results in each classroom, in each school? And if we're not, we need to respond immediately to make sure that we are. And so it's sort of an accountability piece.
That's great, and I would just end by saying that I would much prefer, as a board member, to hear from sample schools what those goals were. Did we meet them in May, June? If not, why not? And how this is being tweaked going forward. Otherwise, it just looks to me like we're spinning our wheels.
Yep.
Because I'm not hearing the specifics. That's all. Thank you. Thank you.
And just to add to that, how agile are we? In the industry that I work in, we have a thing called agile development, which is basically this. You create a plan to develop a piece of software, but as you move through that process, they call it agile development because you can, change course, recalibrate instantaneously. Now, education has long been seen as something that doesn't move agilely, very agile. It's not agile. It's not, because you have a whole year, and and it's seen that a lot of times you don't want to change direction or recalibrate mid-year, mid-quarter. You're going to tough it out. So how agile are we with
If you
this
look
program?
If you look at 2, 3, and 4, every single box under 2, 3, and 4 you'll see words such as monitor or update. You'll see define, adjust based on data. You'll see define, you'll see update. You'll see, those are the types of words. So really the point of this and the point of monitoring is that you don't carry on with some plan for the year if it's not working. And so that's the point. That's what's asked throughout the year is what are your results? What do you need to change as a result of your results? If you're getting great achievement, we need to know that to celebrate. If you're seeing things that you're spending time doing something and you need to adjust, that's what it's for.
So you're anticipating that you could change direction every 90 days?
Well, I think with our map testing, it's probably more like every semester. I mean,
Okay, so it's, okay.
we test at the start, midpoint, and then at the end. And I think at the midpoint, if there's issues, problems, I think we're able to make some changes at that point.
I just had a
Yes.
question about, thank you. Just had a question about, when you talked about the goals and the professional development for each school and what those are, I think I saw that maybe a few months ago. I asked for that. Like anyway, how do we measure if those, or are you measuring if those are, if those goals are met, or if the professional development was implemented, and how are you doing those?
Part of this plan is to do that. We have had professional development in the system for years and years. And it's been something that we want to continue to make sure, if we're going to spend time doing that, that it plays off in the classroom. So that's under step 4 in here, which is the progress monitoring. If you ask us what kind of data we have for student achievement in the system, we can talk about MAP data or WKCE data or ACT data. If you ask what type of program data we have, or if you look at even our current level of workshop in this district, we don't have a lot of data that would say our current level of practice is at here or here. Last year, we did an eSale tool to look at it across our schools, and some of you were a part of that training, or looking at, just to review, is the training working? So now that we have the literacy training, one of the sources that we're going to do for that professional development is we go back again 2 or 3 times a year with the eSale to see, are we seeing a change in the classroom environment or in the practices that we're seeing? So that was a big piece of not just looking at student achievement, but looking at program data as well. And we're going to use the eSale one specifically with this piece to monitor, is there a change in practice? And as we mentioned when we started this journey, probably 6 months ago in our visits to Fort Atkinson and other pieces, you take the eSale tool and look at some of the classrooms in Fort Atkinson where the training has had 2 or 3 years, and you would significantly score some of those classrooms at a very high level. And that is part of our goal, is to move as many classrooms as we can to that highest level.
And don't forget, really this testing only covers an important part of what we do, but not everything.
Right.
We test, we have other kind of tests. For example, you ever seen the high school bands perform? That's a test. And that shows results. Have you ever been to the South High School art show? I mean, those are the kind of things too that, and they're anecdotal, and they're very subjective, but the things that Ryan's are talking about are things that are contained in the state tests and some of the MAP testing, and that is, not all we do here. So I want to keep that in perspective too, that there are other ways of testing that don't lend themselves to a standardized test.
So we're saying that we've identified what our problem is in literacy. What are some of our problems? Is that correct?
I'd say some,
Okay.
or at least
And-
we've identified
Right.
where we're starting.
Right, and I think I think it's pretty accurate. Or some of the things, that I've observed. So the literacy problem identification, I think, is pretty accurate. These are things that we need to do better, or do. And then this is how we're gonna do it. The theory of action is how we're gonna do it. How?
Theory of action sort of describes a philosophy of if we believe if we do more of an investment in this type of work,
Yes.
especially from a leadership standpoint, that we'll have a better result of this taking hold or getting traction in the
Okay,
system.
so then the 100-day plan is how?
A 100-day plan is it's basically, are we living what we said we'd live with our theory of action? And we tried to just draft, and it's about 4 or 5 pages in here, and
Yeah.
didn't mean to have it, you don't need to look at every word in there, but what we tried to frame out is, where are all our formal learning experiences? When are we taking the time to really work with teachers? Because the question is, if we're really asking a teacher to have 1 or 2 new practices, where is that going to happen? How are we going to provide time for that practice? How are we going to provide feedback? And you had to really walk our talk. When Todd talked about funneling this down to a couple key things, that was what we were intentionally trying to do. Not to say we're going to change the world and have 50 things that we're not going to see through. This was about getting that focus. So the 100-day plan just sort of defines our work day to day, week to week.
So that is how.
And it's a planning document, but
Right.
you can see at
It's kind of
November 30th is our first 100-day checkpoint, that we have some real significant targets to ask ourselves if we've met or not.
And then the last page then should be the result, the outcome.
Yeah, and that's
Okay.
just our checkpoint. So you
Okay.
said, you probably should have done the presentation, because that was a lot clearer than I did.
No, but really, I'm pleased that it has been clearly identified what the problem is, very clearly, and it's true, so we got some hard work to do. And now tied into this is educator effectiveness, that'll go along with this, right? Or support this?
Yeah, technically, ask Sarah Barrett, who's in the audience, we asked her to bury every single target with educator effectiveness, which includes monitoring every classroom, setting goals with every teacher, into this work, so it wasn't a separate thing,
Right,
but it
so
was
it isn't
only
separate.
setting goals to
Right.
have these achievements.
Right, so
So
that's
it was
hand in
some
hand.
complex work. Last year, we kept it separate because it was new,
Uh-huh.
but this year, we didn't want it to feel like a different thing. The only reason we're monitoring and setting goals is to increase student achievement. We're not doing it because of educator effectiveness, we're doing it to increase achievement for
Because
students.
we've just been so, kind of status quo on tests, and maybe even a little below. And we've got to do something about it. So this is, I think, a
But, I think,
excellent start.
and one of the things that I'm working on now is showing that all those tests, I don't want to say flat. If you look at our three-year average, we're making some progress.
Small
But
progress.
our demographics have changed dramatically
Oh,
over
yes.
the
Oh,
last
yes.
few years.
Oh,
But
yes.
we're still having positive things. Even though those demographics have changed, we're still having a higher percentage of kids take ACT and do well on it. We still have, some good scores in various areas despite some of those challenges that we have. And that's some of the information that I'm having folks disseminate and
Well,
put together.
I just think this problem identification statement is really the key, that we know where the problems are and we're going to do something about it. And that, to me, is that's the key.
Last thing, and I'm not at all being critical here. I hope you understand that. This rollout district goals on August 26th, 27th, 28th, I know that coordinates with our teacher meetings. Will we hear that in September with specifics? Can we? As to what these goals are specifically for?
I think,
14, 15?
Those occur at each site. Every site has their, I have.
It's district goal.
Yeah, district goals. Every site has established their SLO. That's really, our district goal is to maximize student achievement. Because.
Because it says you're going to roll them out.
Yeah, and so across the district, every building principal, these are building principal targets and action plans. So that week, we're being very specific that every building is rolling those out, that their work is aligned to those. So, that's why that's
The
in.
principal comes up with a plan, correct?
Principal
Right.
creates their
I'm living
site
it right
plan
now.
based on student achievement data. They roll it out
Yeah.
with their staff.
Yeah.
Most of the staff have developed it with them. But it's just sort of these checkpoints that we need to make sure that those are articulated throughout the system. Every teacher has to have a goal aligned to those. So these are all sort of checkpoints.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I am just trying to ask a really simple question. End of August, so therefore we meet right after that. We meet the, whatever it is, 10th of September.
Yep.
Can we see some of these specific goals?
Definitely.
Can we then hear
Should have every school.
Yeah,
the 100
Yeah, should have.
day, how are we doing on that? Because that would be, to me at least, a lot more meaningful than what I consider to be, I'm sure very helpful for you and everybody else, sort of a very jargon-filled, I don't
Yeah,
understand.
the best thing I can do is we have we did these last year. We meet one-on-one for about an hour and a half with every site 4 times a year to get updates on each of these
On their
targets.
progress.
Right.
We did those this summer, we did them last year. So actually, our first series of these is the second week of school, September 8th to the 12th or 13th. We have the entire week is building after building after building, sharing out their goals to us. We could make those more than open to anybody that wanted to sit and see it live. I could also even videotape a couple of them and share some of their documents with us. They're really impressive to be at. You get a chance to see schools that have taken their goals and they articulate them for their staff, or what it looks like at North, what it looks like at Butler. I also shared a couple months ago, I think at a Friday packet, a couple of the performance reports from, I used Hillcrest and North at the time. That was their end of the year.
Yes.
That's really the plans that they peel apart and share. But so definitely you could attend any of the school sites. I could get the date, the time that they're sharing some of those up with staff.
But I'm asking if you can present those to us.
I could even
And
have,
then present the monitoring as it goes on.
sure.
And I mean really specific,
Yeah.
not they're being great at being intentional. I mean, I really
No.
want to hear
We
what their
could have, as a
specific
bright
goals
lights,
are.
I think it would be no problem at all with the September
Okay.
targets, having a building come and present the September targets here. And you could see almost the process live as to how they share each of these milestones, which you can start with the goals and what they're doing as a school for the year, what's their plan. And you can see it, because it's really impressive. It's really empowering to be at the hard work that's going into it.
As long as we saw the monitoring and how it was being
Well, the monitoring.
checked in
yeah.
December and
Well,
March.
the monitoring, again, we have that sheet that you have is actually their school report card, their scorecard. We scored those last year. A 3 means they hit the target. A 2 was that we needed some follow-up, and a 1 would be we sort of missed the boat. The December ones as well, we have a full week in December, we have a full week in March. It's every 12 weeks we go to those sites to do that, because we can give updates on any of the schools as well, and we actually, some of the end of the year ones would knock your socks off in terms of.
Well,
the
then
res-
it should.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to see it.
They were great, and I'll point out, I could point out a number, but I'll point out, Butler's work with what they did achievement-wise for students, what they did in terms of just collecting data about where student growth, what happened, or where classroom growth was. They really did a nice job, and they do formal presentations and take the work pretty seriously, because we look at it as almost a sales report or quality checkpoints on their building, so they know their school year is tied to that.
But we don't know about that.
No, we don't do that. We don't
Yeah.
see that.
And that would be wonderful. Other than scores, test scores, we don't get any of the information behind it, you know? And it would be so helpful if we could see how a school has set a goal and met the goal, beyond or just met the goal. Are these goals owned by teachers? Or are they,
Yeah,
or they're just made up by the
no.
principal?
We do everything we can to stay away from anything top-down, including not having our district team set goals for buildings. We try to facilitate the process of goal
Good.
development, and we encourage every building to have a team that represents,
Good.
their work. And basically, we want to be a student-driven system. Instead
Sure.
of if top-down is our system, then we want students at the top, and where their current performance is sort of drives where the building goals are.
Yeah, I agree with Ellen. We need more,
I think we should be able to provide every school, I mean, in a document.
yeah,
and then-
more
great.
testimony.
And then if there's some that.
I
that
think so.
could come and you
Right.
could,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
present.
it's unreasonable to present all of them at one of these
No,
meetings,
but you could
because we'd
present
be
a
here until
document
4 in the
that-
morning.
And you could review those.
You don't want to stay till
So,
4 in the morning?
I don't want to say it's 4 in the morning.
Son.
No,
But if
what
you
I'm
wa-
saying is, you could have the document with all the schools.
Yeah, and then present
And then-
some highlights.
Yeah.
Specific
The committee
highlights.
could say, we'd like to see this particular
Right.
school, for example.
Sure.
Right,
Sure.
right. I agree with Bill. I don't want everything, but to show how, a goal is met and developed and maintained and supported and tweaked, et cetera. Okay.
We'd love to. Those are actually some pretty big highlight weeks as you get a chance to celebrate what's working, and
We need to know
and you
that.
want to hear about the reflection that occurs.
Yeah.
You hear about, here's where we missed right now, and here's what we're going to do the next 12 weeks to refocus or things.
That would be more meaningful. Yes.
And I think that they would like to share that. I mean, if they're doing a great job, if just as in any job, I think that they would want us to see that. So,
It's a lot of sharing of information, but that's what this committee is about. We're about doing all that we can do to support student improvement, and this is a big initiative.
Our next meeting is at September,
Second Tuesday.
is this first day of school?
It's the second, Tuesday the second.
We have a full day of those,
F and F, I'm sorry.
so it'd be the 9th? September 9th, I think, is our next.
September
D and
2nd.
I, well, it
Second.
says the second, but maybe they didn't mean it.
Either way,
Oh,
either way, there it is. Even on our bright lights that night, we could have a team. It would take about probably 45 minutes, which is about what we take anyway. But we could do a formal presentation. I could ask a school to do it that night instead of live. I think it would be.
I mean, is
a-
that a
a real
good time?
thing.
Is the timing good for the schools?
Yeah,
First
but they're
day
going
of
to be doing
school.
it. They're going to be doing
What?
it that week
First day
anyway.
of school.
Yeah, first day of school's a big day, and then for a principal to have to prepare a presentation, that might be over the
Yeah.
top.
And we have them. We could do one in October too. So not a problem.
Maybe that would be better, Ryan, to do it in October than
Yeah,
September.
sure.
you
Well,
know.
that you could have the documents, and at that point, the committee could say, we'd like to see these schools. Yeah.
You know, I think it's always better that when you give us documents, that there's some, presentation that goes with it, because there's so much to read that I wouldn't want any of that information not to get read. So maybe we should do that in October, because boy, that first day of school, I know. And don't principals still meet on the first day after school to decide if they need more staff, et cetera? Do they still do that?
That pretty much is taken care of before that, hopefully. I mean, we're
Well, you don't-
monitoring this every day right now.
Yeah,
throughout the month
sometimes
of
you don't
August.
know till the
We-
first day of school.
There might be one or two surprises, but not, hopefully not.
Yeah, at this point, we're monitoring enrollment weekly. Stephanie, through the centralized enrollment function, you've got your pulse on that. Chris and I stay connected regarding staffing.
So you're
all
pretty
those
certain
pieces.
by the first day of school, yeah, that's
Absolutely.
definitely improvement. Okay. Thank you for your patience with us, Ryan. Thank you. Anything else on SAIL? Now, we've got another program in Waukesha called SAIL 2, do we not?
E-sale.
ESAIL.
Sale, that's what I thought.
Students
Enforce
achieving independent living, and that's at the Transition Academy.
Yeah, and that's entirely different. That's the program over at the Early Learning Center, right? Right, okay, so we don't want to get them mixed up.
Yeah, that's what it is.
All right, moving forward. Our next item then is curriculum instruction, professional development planning, Ryan.
Oh, that is me again.
Yes, it is.
Yes, and you'll hear some tie-ins to what we heard about with our professional development kickoff and what we're trying to do. But basically, this information item, we're sharing a packet with you in here that was shared with all of district staff in the last month or so. We take professional development very seriously in that it is more than just 8 hours of time. It's more than just seat time. It's more than asking 14,000 students to stay home. But what we're excited about is that each year as we've planned this out, we've continued to try to design a model that's flexible for our professionals to learn at the time that's most convenient to them. That allows time for the learning to be applied and put into the classroom and allows time for other work. One thing that we're celebrating this year is, I mentioned before, we had the Literacy Institute that occurred. But I mentioned before that with 100 new teachers coming aboard, and close to 25 that were hired after July 19th, that's an ongoing problem for a system our size. And we don't want to look in the past when we talk about professional development and ask people if they went to something or not. We want to continue to be looking forward and providing every source of support we can. And that was our challenge in the last 2 years. 2 years ago, we took this challenge on with the Grading for Learning initiative, and there was a series of staff that were hired on that never had a chance to take the time to think about those concepts, to learn about some practices and put it in play. And as a result, there were some gaps, or they were told things, unfortunately, like wait till next summer or things. And that was just something that I think made all of us cringe. And we sort of put the pencil down to try to alleviate some of those challenges. As a result, we developed a teacher development program which was available at night. And it's a concept that we kicked off last year, and we're going to continue with it this year. And we call it TDP, or the Teacher Development Program. And basically the concept that we did was we offer everything all month, every month. Grading for Learning, literacy training, math training, basic work on classroom management, basic work on IEPs, whatever the foundational practices are. And the model that we designed was every Wednesday for a month, there's a 2-hour training at night, followed by hours of application in the classroom. Then there's another 2 hours the next Wednesday, followed by a week of application, followed by 2 more hours. So it takes about a month, or we do 3 nights with that. And it's a model that has been very well attended, and it's a model that we've gotten great feedback on because teachers can choose which courses they're taking. They're not necessarily leaving the classroom to get subs. We're not necessarily telling the students to get home. And you're not waiting. It's sort of a readily available professional development series. So we're excited to go on with that this year. We have more acronyms in there, but it says CLM 101 and 102. which stands for Comprehensive Literacy Model, and we have a 101 model for anybody that would be hired at any point in time, a 102 and a 103. And we've done the same with almost all our courses. So we feel like we've starting to meet the needs of really making sure that any teacher hired in our system at any time has quality access to to training. We also wanted to make sure that anybody who may be performing at a level that they would like some more support or more training has access to that. And that lastly, we weren't leaving every building alone to have to come up with a high quality of training on their own, as these are all district level across our system and taught by Rose or Emily or some people that have really had practice and time doing this. So this model is we call it the district model. And while we put this out as a framework, we hand it out as early as we can so that every building can design their own professional development to complement this or to provide time for these learnings to take shape in their school. And so at schools, you're going to hear things along the lines of Butler uses OTLs, which stands for Opportunities to Learn, and they have those every Tuesday night. They have a series of teachers learning. You've heard about PLCs or professional learning communities at schools or teacher time, book studies. There's just a great amount happening. And so we've really tried to distinguish what is the district's role in this and providing consistency, support, 24/7 training at any time for anyone in our system. And what's a building's role in this, which is basically to bring it to life and have it really be there for students. And we've found some nice balance in that the last 2 years, and I'm sharing this packet as kind of an overview of the dates and a year at a glance for that work.
Is this in reading over all the stuff today, somewhere I read that if teachers don't attend certain things, I don't know if it's the Summer Institute or, that they're still responsible for all of the information, because I don't know if it's repeated during the school year. How can they pick it up if they miss certain things?
Yeah, whether they miss, whether they're recently hired, whether they're
Yes.
even here. The expectation is that those practices or some of those foundational things are in our system. So we do have a requirement of that.
Right.
We've been flexible with how people can meet some of
Yes.
those things.
Yes.
Where you've seen people take different work, but at the same time, it is a requirement. We want to make sure all students have access to some of those pieces.
That's great, so nobody misses out. Mr. Baumgart?
Slightly different question regarding this schedule you put out. The new teacher orientation on here is on August 11th, is at Carroll Grad Center. We received an invitation for the luncheon to be at North High School. They just moved it? I just thought maybe you didn't want us at the same place, but.
Joke.
So we'll be at Carroll.
We'll be at North.
Oh,
We've had some problems.
it's at North. Okay.
I'll take a look at that. Carroll has been great to work with a lot of our programs, and their grad center is really great. They've gotten busier and busier over the years, and our summer work has gotten more populated, and each year we've sort of expanded beyond what they could provide. And North works great, so
fine.
there's a big parking lot.
I just didn't want to go to the wrong place.
No. We also, what's interesting, and I'm going to point this out, is new teachers aren't a typical new teacher anymore. It doesn't always mean that you don't have experience. You can get a new teacher in our system that taught for 25 years.
Absolutely.
You can get a new teacher that came with a training program that directly matches what we're doing, and you can get somebody who came with a training program that maybe doesn't match. So we've cut our new teacher day down to 1 day, which is more of a welcome, but the rest of the PSI week, they're a part of that, but they have to do a self-assessment on day one to really see where their skills are at and what they have and don't. They have to prioritize their training. So they get to be a part of the mix. So we are welcoming them. We do have some specific courses. We also have ongoing courses because we know that if somebody has a lot of training to do, doing it all in 1 week of their life isn't optimal for their own learning. So we have things that will get them off in the right direction, but at the same time, September, October, November are always here to support, and there's ongoing new teacher support.
Right, and you also have a condition of employment that they have to take 9 credits during the first 5 years of employment. I love it.
Yeah, those credits
just love it.
are fantastic, and what we've loosened up in the past number of years is exactly what those 9 credits entail. And they're putting a plan, usually each individual teacher puts a plan together.
Okay.
Because again, they might come in with a 316 certification in reading,
That's
and
true.
they might want to be focusing on a different area of that, where other people might not have that at all and might decide to get some depth. So we've not required, 5 years ago, it was exactly what to
Yes,
take,
it
and
was.
it's slowly changed to, we suggest these courses, but if people have just taken a course or have demonstrated expertise, they don't have to.
So there's some flexibility there, then they still have to take the 9 credits, but it can be different. Okay, great. Okay. Educator effectiveness, another huge.
All right.
Oh, gosh.
Sarah,
Huge undertaking.
one of the things that we're celebrating, Sarah Barron's going to take us through, but really, hats off to Sarah's leadership and to really our administrators for last year. We piloted this, as a system, across the system last year, and we feel more than prepared to take this on and do a great job with it this year. Sarah had helped us to interpret all of the acronyms that came out of educator effectiveness and bring it to life. So we're celebrating that. And her new challenge this year wasn't to just get it started, but her challenge this year, and I mentioned it earlier, is to make the work of educator effectiveness invisible and directly aligned to the work of what great leadership is needed through our system to support student achievement, and not just have it be a side
DI.
thing. This is a DPI piece. So Sarah Barrett is here to take us through, and there's a color handout in front of you.
Take it away, Sarah.
So,
Good job.
thank you for having me here. I want to give you just like an update overview of the journey that we've traveled over the last year. If you remember, I was here about a year ago, and we were just talking about the educator effectiveness system and what our plans were for the school year. The model that we adopted is the state model, the DPI model. And I'm going to really talk about 2 components of the model. Part of the model is the Danielson framework for teaching that supports good practices in teaching. And the other component is the process piece and learning the educator effectiveness system. When you guys are talking about goal setting, that's what the educator effectiveness system is about goal setting. And so part of the process that we enter into the school year is setting a school learning objective, and each teacher sets a student learning objective. And this last year, we asked all of those goals to be aligned. So they were either a goal in literacy or a goal in math. And every classroom teacher wrote a specific goal. It could be for a cohort of students in their class, it could have been for a whole classroom of kids, but a growth goal, identifying an area of need for their students, and then developing a goal for that. And then with that goal, developing a plan of implementation and what are the practices that they're going to use to support that? How are they going to monitor the progress of the goals? How are they going to know? There are going to be checkpoints within the course of the school year that it is monitored. That's called developing an EEP. And the other part, it's another acronym. And by the time we got done with our training last summer, we were acronymed up to our eyeballs. But anyway, an EEP has 2 components. One part of it is the SLO, the student learning objective, and that can be for a school or for a student, for a teacher. The other part of that educator effectiveness plan is developing your own professional practice goals. So doing some reflecting, using the Danielson framework for teachers, or for principals as they're developing their school SLOs, looking at the principal practices and reflecting about where they are professionally, and where do they need to grow, and then identifying and developing a plan for growth. That happens, all of that happens. The drop dead date is like the end of October. So we have those feedback conversations. As we develop those, then you start doing the work. You're doing the work, and there's a midpoint check in January where formally we sit down and take a look at what progress has been made. Do I need to adjust this goal? Do I need to adjust the way that I'm monitoring this? Formative assessment is used, and really that's the dipstick along the way that really helps the teacher. And I was listening to what you said, Mr. McCaffrey, about those checkpoints along the way and the nimbleness of the system. That's the whole premise behind educator effectiveness, is to have some nimbleness to the system where a teacher's really understanding the kind of work that their kids are doing using that student data of the assessment, and then looking at, okay, that's not working, but the kids they aren't making the progress, I need to adjust something. So it's really a shift. And then there's an end-of-the-year check, and the end-of-the-year check is collaboratively done. So teachers will self-score, they'll have conversations, they'll look at evidence, and no more is it, I have a hunch, or this is what I think. You gotta have evidence that supports the work and the progress that the kids have made. And then there's a rubric that has been developed by DPI that clearly defines where you land, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's the self-score. So that's that goal-setting piece of it. The other part of educator effectiveness is using the Danielson framework for teaching. And that, for teachers, that defines what the practices, the good practices look like in a classroom. There are 4 domains. Last year at this time, I also provided you with a copy of that. I can send that perhaps maybe in the next board packet if you would like me to. But there are 4 domains within the Danielson framework. Well, the first domain is planning and preparation, and then there are 5 components within there that we study about and learn about. Classroom environment is domain 2. Instruction is domain 3, and professional responsibilities are domain 4. Part of our process this last year and last summer, and we're doing it, continuing to do it this summer, and that is all of our principals, all of our assistant principals, effectiveness coaches, and coordinators are trained in the Danielson model, and the way that they get trained is go through 30 or 4 hours of module training, learning about the Danielson framework, being able to identify practices, and then using that framework rubric, identifying that's the evidence that tells me this practice is rated at a proficient level, or that practice is a basic level, because these are the pieces of evidence that I see. So that learning that we did, that teachers did, that our administrators did together, or independently, resulted in them being licensed, or licensed isn't the word, what's the word I want? Certified, thank you. Certified within the Danielson framework. And you jump in?
Go ahead, go ahead.
And so through the course of the year, we wanted to make sure we were all on the same page. And so we had some time that we were doing some calibrating together. We would do learning walks together, pair up, go to different buildings, do some walkthroughs, and then talk about what you saw. I would rate that as a basic level because this is what I saw. So that calibrating happens as well. There's still some training going on this year with new coordinators, new principals, et cetera. And so that was our pilot year. So that was our learning year. This next year, we're going into, it now is a mandated year, and I feel we really have a good year of learning under our belt, and there was a lot of learning that happened along the way. I think teachers learned a lot about goal setting. I think they learned a lot about really looking at student work and thinking about their instruction and how does that match up.
Sarah, when I think of an instructional model, the instructional model that I was familiar with, you know, maybe before you were born,
Probably
was
not.
the old Madeline Hunter.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that this is very similar to Madeline
is.
Hunter, only more detailed.
It is.
I mean, Madeline Hunter talked about how to prepare a lesson,
Yep.
how to present a lesson, how to practice a lesson, and how to evaluate a lesson. And
Yep.
Danielson sounds pretty much like that, right?
It,
I mean, there's maybe more details
yes,
in
and
it, but,
I
but
think
the
they
basics.
exactly. I think that that the Danielson model takes that a little bit further in
Yes, it
that it
does.
really gets descriptive with if you're at a basic level and we want you to get to a proficient level, these are the practices or these are the things that you need to do. So then a teacher can say, okay, I'm at the basic level. This is what I have to do. This is what I have to learn about. This is what I have to grow. So I think it's a clear method. It's a clear way of providing feedback to teachers. I think it's a safe way to get feedback because it is what it is. When you're in a classroom, you see what you see, and I don't judge anything. And that's a big part of the training too, is to remove any kind of bias that you might have as you're observing teachers. The bias is removed. You don't say, I think, or the kids look disengaged. How can you tell by looking at a kid whether they're disengaged? You can tell by their behavior.
So basically, it's an instructional model.
Yes.
Okay. How do you engage students in learning a concept or skill?
Yes.
Good, I know something.
So the other piece that I want to share with you is that throughout this, we were doing some data collecting.
Yes.
We're talking an awful lot about data collecting. And so we did a survey, and that's provided to you in your packet as well. I think that went out in the board packet. That's the big spreadsheet. And I just wanted to highlight a few pieces in there. There are 5 or 6 different categories. This is a tool that was developed by DPI, and we used this survey in the spring of last year and then in the spring again of this year. And if you look at the front part of it, the first part is the knowledge of educator effectiveness system. And if you look at the spring of 13, a lot of it, the pieces were not in place. And I think we really moved the needle to action planning and implementation and people really understanding that. I would say that probably capacity building looks the same as well, just because I think of the experiences that what people learn through the course of the year helped it go from just not in place to really understanding the system.
The numbers on here are those, for the red numbers are the more recent ones.
Correct.
But is that a school or is that? What is
That's
the-
administrator. That's administrator, so.
Why doesn't it come out always to be the same number?
Because that's a good question. Because as I was calculating, sometimes they didn't respond. I sent this to them as a Google Doc, and so I asked them to put their.
So you should have had the same number, I mean, I understand.
Yeah, I know.
This is pilot year. But
Thank you, Bill.
should have had the same number
I know.
on each line.
Yes.
So some responded.
Yes,
some
and,
didn't.
right, and the baseline data had fewer than the spring of 14 data. I mean, this is not,
That's all right.
it's not real scientific. The point is, I hope that you can see that there's been some learning that's happened, and that I think people are feeling more confident, understanding the system.
And when we go real, they'll all respond.
Yeah,
They'll
well,
have
I'll do it a different way to make sure I have the right numbers. So, that's the educator effectiveness system in a nutshell.
So, for example, as Bill is asking, under educator knowledge of the EE system.
Yeah.
And the first box, all district leaders understand, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So we go over to purpose building. What does that 13 mean?
In the spring of 2013,
Yeah,
in terms of leaders understanding the educator effectiveness system, we were identifying needs, we were exploring things, we were answering a lot of questions, we were building the purpose behind educator effectiveness. That's where we were in spring of 13. If you jump over into spring of 14, you see 22 people, that's in the red.
people, that represents
That's 22
people.
people responded saying,
Okay.
we're articulating, we're trying, we're answering the questions, we're seeing the way. So we went from building a purpose to really the rubber's hitting the road.
Okay.
So that's, with each of those categories, those larger categories, not in place, purpose building, action planning, implementation, and then refinement.
Okay. Wow.
Good. And you're ready to go.
We are, well,
How many school districts did the pilot?
well, there were schools within districts that did the pilot. We made the decision here, we had 2 schools that had a couple of teachers in the pilot, Rose Glen and Central. But as we were learning, it only made sense, if we're gonna do this, let's just do it, let's learn it, let's have everybody learn it, because in a year, everybody's gonna have to do it, so why wouldn't we all learn it together? And so I think that was part of the comfort in learning, was that we're learning this together, and
Okay.
so we can,
I'm going to say, this is required across the state. There is this model. There is one other model that you might hear discussed. It's titled the CISA 6 model, and I guess we can guess where that's coming from, which is CISA 6. But actually, CISA 6 has a training, it took place here in Pewaukee today, for a lot of other districts that are using their model, which is a state-approved model as well. They're somewhat similar, but there's some significant differences between the 2 models. But again, that one was approved as being a secondary model because a state could adopt the state one or create something comparable. But everybody is all in this year, and as we talked about the decision to pilot, as challenging as it was last year, I think we're all celebrating. I know we're all celebrating the fact that we had a year to practice this and get some habits down, and we're not just coming to this cold without for the first time. So.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay. The last item on the agenda is something that I asked Ryan to include, and over the last 2 years, Ryan would testify that he and I have had numerous conversations about, well, no, this isn't play, this is recess as being, we talked about unstructured time for students during the school day. It could be recess, it could be playtime in kindergarten, et cetera, but we both know that it's not consistent across the district, and I think that that's a problem. And if you look at the blue sheet, I've numbered so that I don't call out the names of schools, et cetera, but there's no consistency. If you look according to buildings, they do different things. Look at number 7. Recess as homeroom teacher arranges, or this one, reward recess periodically. What kind of business is that? You only get a recess if you earn it, and everything in research. I have spent the last month reading article upon article upon article. We don't reward recess. Recess is something that we give to all children, and it is never to be used, taken away as a punishment, or ever taken away as consequences for misbehavior. It goes on to say that in the work world, in the adult work world, people take breaks. Do you take a break? Sometimes.
Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
You take a break, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I'll be darned.
I know, it's
I'll be
odd, but
darned.
I do.
You take a break.
You have to recharge.
There's scheduled breaks.
Yeah, right.
Yes, there are. In the adult world, there are scheduled breaks,
Oh, yeah.
right? But for children, we don't have that consistency anymore across the board. And I think it's a problem in our district. And as Mrs. Haas pointed out, I've given you some research, and I hope that you'll take some time to review it. In fact, I included a page that has tons and tons and tons of places where you can go to read. I bet there were, on the bottom of your computer where it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, it went on, to like 50.
Right.
There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles based on research written by noted educators across the country that will tell you is recess needed in the 21st century, and the answer to every article is absolutely. And it's not something that a school district should leave up to a teacher to decide or an administrator to decide. It should be a district thing. And it always was. And I know we want to, empower our schools to make some decisions about use of time allocations, especially now that we're going to be having 15 minutes added onto the day. And I certainly hope that as we begin the school year, that if we call for another report, that we will see that every day in every school, kindergarten through 5th grade, that there's at least a 15-minute break, outside, inside, whatever, for free, unstructured activities. The research, yes, yes.
Say that. I'm comfortable with it in some ways, and if you recall, it's a year and a half ago, across the hall, we had that whole session with a number of teachers coming in and talking, much like you're having tonight, but also with these articles, as to how constructive they feel it is. So, when you're saying you're hoping we'll see, it seems to me that as a district, if we embrace this concept for our, what do they call here, kinder, I thought that was an interesting German language there, but, then we ought to move toward policy.
Yeah.
And also, you said
Thank you.
20 minutes, we're talking Wisconsin winter. That's meaningless by the time the kids get their boots and snow.
I agree
pants on,
with
they're
you.
out there, what, 3 minutes to breathe the fresh air and then come in?
I agree with you.
So I think we really have to look at this, and if we really do endorse it, we better set a district-wide policy.
That's right.
And not just say we hope we'll see this.
That's right. You're absolutely right. And you know, I talked to lots of principals throughout the past school year, and they'll say, well, the kids get a recess with lunch. Well, you know, the lunch periods are only at 25 to 30 minutes at the most, so how can a little kid eat their lunch, go and get all those clothes on, and get outside? Guess what happens? The bell rings sometimes before the kids even get
What
outside.
did recess look like when you were
Well,
principal or a teacher or whatnot?
Well, I mean, that was a long time ago, I was a principal. We used to have morning recess for K through 3 and afternoon recess K 3 and 4 5. 4 5 only got recess in, 4 5 6 only got recess in the afternoon. Now
Lunch,
there's,
no lunch recess?
sure, there was a,
There was lunch recess.
because lunchtime was longer at that time. It used to be like more like 40 minutes.
Yeah, it was like 40, 45 minutes.
Yeah, it was like
That's
40
what I
minutes,
remember.
you know. And so more is not better, folks. More instructional time is not better.
Is this a report of where they were or where they're planning to go?
This is from last year.
Actually, okay.
Like Hatfield didn't have any recess in kindergarten
Meadowbrook did,
None.
and she's saying that they didn't.
or third grade?
Pardon me?
Number
So-
4 didn't have any recess in third grade. Is that what we're
Right.
saying? Really?
Yes,
Not,
really.
not as, that, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things we talked about in update, I think one of the things we can do is double check on some of these times. I know that schedules are, this may have been, I know when it requested, this may have been done by an office team or what was on a board. I do know there's some formal times or informal times that are planned too. So I think some of the points that are raised are really important to address in this conversation. We can do our best to follow up. Right now, I know schedules are being crafted as we go. We do know, if I can respond quick too, one of our major goals in our system the last couple of years, and we've been using this term optimal learning conditions, is to ensure that we have optimal learning conditions. And we talked a lot about, that means that students are getting breaks. That means their students, when they're learning something, they have time to use it in their life, apply their thinking, An optimal learning condition for a physics lab is to be doing physics experiments and stand up and use a lab. An optimal learning condition is for kids to interact with these new ideas, but it also goes into what type of environment do we want, what type of quality air even in the classrooms do we want, what type of seating do we want. You've seen some of those changes, and definitely includes making sure that developmentally we look at the attention span of the learner, and we design lessons that meet that need, and at the same time, we design breaks that meet that need. So, you know, exploring this by all means, when we understand the research behind this, it only benefits the learning environment to begin with. And so,
Yes, it
I think
does.
if we're way out of balance, we have to continue to uncover this. We can get a report out really quickly. And again, to get an update to this, I think this is a good framework, and I think it does pose some of the questions that are being asked by us, by teachers, by community
Parents.
members. And I do know, just so, you know, in the conversation, there was a term used 4 or 5 years ago which the term was non-negotiable.
Yes.
And that came with 90 minutes of non-negotiable for reading and other things that I think had great intentions at the time and had some thought, but it didn't, if, in all practicality, having a 90-minute sustained reading period for young students, let alone adults, or other things, it crunched into taking jackets off, taking attendance minutes and things like that, and as a result, some of those rules may still be existing or at least in habit today, and we have to take a look at some of those things. So I think this is a great time to get the most accurate information. And the discussion that's happening here, I think, is a discussion that we want to continue to happen, which is, what is this an optimal learning environment for 5-year-old, a 15-year-old, or
Right,
18?
right. And, you know, the articles that I read, I just included one, really point out that it's not an optimal learning condition if people don't have an opportunity to interact with each other, just to take a break, just to take a breather, and it's just not happening consistently, and it's important. I also read an article, and you know, I'll stop then, is, it said that because children don't have this opportunity, they come to school in the morning and they usually get to school, most kids get to school just around the time the bell's gonna ring or the bus drops them off even late sometimes in the morning. So there's not much time in the morning before school begins to play outside. And if they don't have morning recess and this little teeny weeny couple of minutes at lunchtime and nothing in the afternoon, it's an awfully long day for a child. But it also said that because they don't have social interaction, they don't know how to get along with each other. And then when they get to middle school, they start the bullying because they don't know, they don't possess proper social skills. And, you know, I'm a strong advocate for that, and I guess I just can't be silent on it. I did get some telephone calls this summer, and it might be because, you know, Mary Beth has talked to a lot of people, and that's wonderful, and I thank you, you know, for your support. And I know that there's parents out there that care. There are parents that care. And this 90-minute non-negotiable has to be communicated that it's not a must-have anymore, because I think that that's what really started it, Ryan, and that was before your time. So, yeah. So, perhaps we can revisit this in the next month or two to see where we're at with this. And I'm sure you're going to have meetings with principals, et cetera, before school begins. And
Yeah.
it's just something that I think needs to be mentioned.
I think our best bet is to have an update in October.
Yep.
But prior to the start of the year, I can get some information out about this discussion.
Okay.
We'll have time to have an accurate depiction of each building. If I asked for it by September 2nd, it might not be exactly
Right,
what's in
right.
place.
And I'm sure principals are rubbing,
I can.
you know, and I'm sure
If they're not watching.
some administrators are rubbing their hands in glee, oh boy, 15 more minutes of reading. So we've added 15 minutes to the day. What a perfect opportunity to provide children with a break during the day. It's a long, long day. You take a break at work, well, then our students should have a break. So it enhances learning. So we'll talk about it again in October and see what happens, okay? Any comments or from any of you? Okay. Continue to fight the battle alone. All right, if there's nothing else then to come before this meeting tonight, the meeting will be adjourned, and we'll have our next meeting on Tuesday, September 2nd, 6 o'clock. Thank you for your participation, your patience, your input, et cetera.